very proud and pleased, honored to chair this first session of the conference after our keynote addresses, very seminal speeches. We have 5 speakers in this session. To start in the order listed in the program, nodhar hammami will read her paper titled Swords and Words to Fight Conventions, Gender and Genre Hybridity in Kingston's The Woman Warrior. I will present the other speakers as they come. I will just remind our speakers that remind them to stick to the time limit of 15 minutes because we have a long day ahead of us and we don't want to be late. All right? Without further ado, give the floor to Nodhar for please.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to open this first panel, happily chaired by our dear Professor Seda Khafina. I'm glad we keep reuniting from time to time since the university years in such academic events and wordful scientific gatherings around new topics to further discuss, maybe to discuss further ideas, topics that need maybe rethinking, reconsideration, extension, and expansion. So especially that the campus, the topic is a call for revisiting hybridity. In fact, it's an occasion for me to reconsider hybridity and to connect it with the gender issues. And maybe to depart from the conventional cultural, biological, ethnic context of the term to espouse its symbolic function as a form of resistance to hierarchy and to absolute ideals. I also took into consideration that phrase in text and context, so therefore I sought to read a literary text from that new perspective. So a text which I chose is Kingston's The Woman Warrior, to come up with 2 manifestations of hybridity. It is when the hybridization of the genre of the text and the hybridization of the gender of the protagonist, which unite by the same token in the text, become a political question here. Maybe it is political because it aims at questioning monolithic discourses and subverting the literary and cultural conventions. Right. So as you see the title, I deliberately chose and selected phonetically maybe adjacent terms, genre, gender, swords and words, because of that intersection, in fact, between those terms. So, fashioned upon the hybrid identity of its author, who upholds the Chinese component of her personality within the American cultural context, Maxine Hong Kingston's narrative, The Woman Warrior, this is the full title, Memoirs of a Girlhood Among Goats, published in 1976. This book resists culture and literary hierarchization by discarding homogeneity and embracing plurality and diversity. The book tends to use the memories of the past to contest authoritarian thoughts about the 2 sexes while concurrently transgressing canonical literature through the adoption of a hybrid genre that goes beyond the genre theory. The author adopts a mode of writing that goes hand in hand with the book's theme of women's subjugation. So the presentation is going to be more focused on the second chapter entitled White Tigers, in which the mythical figure of the female warrior named Famulan is employed in the narrative as a weapon to twist the rigid thoughts and shape static social assumptions of femininity and masculinity. I'm sure you are acquainted with the name of Famulan. If not, through the book, it must be through the movie that has been recently released in 2020, something like that. So we know the myth. So the masculinized actions of female warriors as culturally assumed are metaphorically used in the noun to make women appear braver and more determined than males. By sharing all communal concerns and taking part in tribal activities, And by encompassing valor and femininity at the same time, the hybrid gender of the woman warrior stands for openness and multiplicity as features that go against male singularity and binarism. The struggle of Kingston against gender roles in the novel synchronizes with her rejection of genre rules, whereby she conjures up a mythical hybrid female in an unconventional hybrid genre. Kingston becomes a modern Famulan whose sword turns into a sharp pen that engraves disruptive words on the pages of her book, just to fight the cultural and literary conventions. That's why I'm playing on two sides, the cultural conventions as well as the literary conventions, all at once. So the first part is going to be about the genre hybridity to overcome the genre law. The book is composed of 5 sections, arranged in a fragmented and discontinuous fashion. The story does not have a plot, singular protagonist, and consistent point of view. It's not modeled upon a linear pattern or interconnected sequence of events. It is composed of titled sections or chapters, read like short stories or snatches of folk stories, as the mother narrated. Because you have here those talk stories are narrated by the author's mother. It's not clear whether the speaking I always refers to the flesh and blood Kingston, or to an imagined narrator, or to characters or a character in the plays. Although Kingston's book won the National Book Critics Circle Award for non-fiction, it's hard to classify under any genre. It's rather a mixture of fiction and non-fiction. Autobiography, memoirs, fantasy, myth, fables, stageable drama, and epic poetry. Kingston's work appears to break with genericity, and I'm quoting David Duff here: genericity is the condition of belonging to a genre, or the elements of a given text that are molded by genre, unquote. The text obeys its own law to become an across-the-board specs. So, though the title declares that the work is a set of memoirs, because the second half of the title is memoirs of a girlhood, but of course it seems that the content and form do not fully respond to the rules of the memoir genre. I'm quoting here the definition of the memoir genre as a history or history record composed from personal observation and experience, closely related to and often confused with autobiography. A memoir usually differs chiefly in the degree of emphasis placed on external events, whereas writers of autobiography are concerned primarily with themselves as subject matter. End of quote from Encyclopedia Britannica. Now, only partially does the book manifest itself as a memoir, mainly through the author's personal observation and interpretation of her cultural heritage. Kingston condemns the misogyny in the Chinese culture through the interpretation of her mother's tales. However, the evaluation of her familial and cultural situation does not rely on personal memories or vivid experiences, but rather rests on reported tales of her mother. That vague memory about factual events weakens the narrator's reliability and disturbs the identification of the book as memoirs. The text may not be a historical record since it includes elements of fiction and creates a confusion between the narrative voice and the remaining characters. The author's representation of her life as analogous to Famulan's life story, for example, is perceived through the use of the first-person narrative while retelling the fairy tale. That reciprocity with the legendary warrior doubts the text's classification as non-fiction and overthrows its adherence to the memoir genre. Of course, here the literary devices of point of view complicate the writer's subjectivity and destabilize the text's genericity. Now, by recounting factual instances and recollecting reminiscences in the life of the author that contributed to her psychological and moral growth, and that's biography or autobiography, is when you picture your own psychological and moral growth, okay, through your narrative. So here the text exceeds the boundaries of the memoir genre to invade the generic zone of autobiography. I'm quoting again the definition from the same encyclopedia, as a retrospective narrative that undertakes to tell the author's own life or a substantial part of it, seeking to reconstruct his or her personal development within a given historical, social, and cultural framework. There are even, of course, many autobiographical instances, and I allow myself to call it a novel because fiction is there. So there are many autobiographical instances that offer an a child and her relationship with her mother and the way she was brought up and educated until she becomes an experienced adult. Nevertheless, there are elements that paint the generic purity of the text as an autobiography, because the light falls on the mother rather than on the narrator or the author. She's a prominent character around whom the narrated stories revolve, rather than on the author, whose memories of childhood feature only in the last chapter. The names of the characters are not real, and the setting of events does not correspond to the actual life of Kingston, since she lived in California, not in China. There's a chapter referring to the no-name aunt that occurred in a Chinese village before the birth of Kingston, yet she implicates herself in the narrative process by visualizing the village, imagining the actions, reactions, and feelings of the Chinese people and of the inhabitants of the village. And more striking is that there's in the chapter White Tigers, the autobiographical element fades away because of the author's imagined life as a woman warrior who lived in ancient China. So, and if Kingston refuses to make her book pure fiction, it's because she denounces the classification of fiction, including short fiction, as a female genre, under the pretense that it is intimate and its plot is manageable. That's why it's attributed to female writers. Genres are divided into male and female genres. Fiction itself is split into canonized fiction, male fiction, and marginalized female fiction. So by adopting the form of the short story alongside the features of non-fiction text like history, reality, and biography, Kingston locates herself within that marginalized genre, yet with a refusal of the totality of its roots. The book is, as I said, divided into chapters. Each of them resembles a short story with a plot, protagonist and surrounding characters, rewritten and reinterpreted by Kingston. Still under the category of fiction, the book can also be considered as a series of short stories, in addition to the autobiographical elements. And since the short story is seen as lower than a novel in the genre hierarchy, Kingston decided to write maybe following that fashion of the short story in order to maybe bring life to such a demoted brand of fiction. The book also draws on fantasy. In the fantasy genre, the incorporation of the fantastic as derived from mythology and magic realism into the realistic depiction of the conditions of the Chinese Americans and the conditions of women, etc., which is itself a sign of hybridity. The hybrid from Mulan, Kingston, from Mulan / Kingston, because it is revealed to be the same character. They join supernatural as well as human features. Her paranormal physical capacities make her like a heroic or heroic Amazon warrior, while her strong sense of affiliation makes her a real Chinese patriot. The heroism of Mulan lets the work appear as a blend of fable and epic. The epic is there too. Although the story is not in form of long narrative poem, it shares with the epic the narration of the adventures and deeds of heroic or legendary figures and the past history of the nation. And of course, to count on Bakhtin's identification of the three characteristics of the epic genre, we can cite, for example, the focus on the national past, the valorization of the national past, the national tradition, and finally, the work should manifest itself as an absolute epic. So through the exposition of cultural heritage, the author valorizes her national past. Yet, when she condemns the ancient sexist practices of her village, she breaks with a part of this past, this oppressive past. Uses it to challenge to the present and construct an image for the future. Kingston records the past with its bright and dark sides. In the epic genre theory, of course here, that goes against the epic because there's a flexibility, okay, when it comes to the past. That went against the recognized inflexibility in the genre theory, which considers the past, I'm quoting Bakhtin, distanced, finished, and closed like a circle. The writer includes the epic in the novel form, but excludes some of its principles. The objective is to fight the genericity and the genre hierarchy. I don't like to see that sheet. It's painful, it's really painful. And I felt the same feeling of pain that, like, I mean, one is obliterating organs or living organs from the body. They could not reduce a 25-page article to 5 or 6. It's incredible. Where's our boss, our tyrant boss? Right. So, of course, here the point is that in the context of the book's dynamic generic identity, Kingston defiantly incorporates the epic, which has been classified as a masculine genre that goes beyond the daily, because the epic goes against the daily, and integrates it within the framing memoir genre as a female genre that discloses emotions and records slices of the author's daily life. Right, the book does not have by the end a specific generic identity and cannot announce itself as belonging to a specific brand of text or as an established newfangled genre because of the transformations it undergoes. Since it has no norms to obey, it resists genericity. The author demonstrates resistance to the law of genre in general. She's not inventing a counter law, as Derrida claims, but just writes without a law, driven by her pursuit for freedom. Now, the second part is, concerned with that idea of masculinity and femininity and how gender hybridity goes beyond the myths of masculinity and femininity. Now, the question of gender and genericity reinforces the idea of belonging to a certain category. So in the same way that humans and animals belong to different species and men and women belong to opposite forms of gender, the intersection of genre and gender is intriguing in the text, especially that it follows the same strategy of hybridization to overcome binarism. The choice of hybridizing the gender of a legendary character is a more inviting way to articulate reality while using imagination to question, maybe unlike the masculine carrot of realism, right? Fantasy here and imagination are tools also to fight those inventions. Masculinity and femininity are attributes that are conventionally associated with the condition of being male or female. Men should follow an acquired comportment in their appearance, talk, performance, and actions in order to be accepted in the cultural hegemony. Women are not allowed to perform masculinity as defined in specific cultures. Now, in the main canon of literature, the main archetypes of women either fall under the model of Eve the Temptress or the paragon of the Virgin Mary. Against these stereotypes, Kingston offers a counter stereotype. He has a counter stereotype of the woman warrior, who is brave, honest, sacrificial, rational, wise, patient, powerful, and physically strong. The woman warrior is a woman capable of joining incompatible qualities like purity and bravery, virginity and sexuality, social visibility and domesticity, power and emotionality, tribal duty and maternity, and largely masculinity and femininity. Her personalized version of the legend, in that version, Kingston envisages a hybrid warrior, an androgynous figure that would obfuscate the demarcation lines between the two sexes, go over binarism, destroy centers, and invent a new human type. Now, of course, the warrior from Mulan easily discloses the performative nature of a gender and divulges the heresy of men's proclivity for battling and natural excellence, mainly in the martial arts. The story of the legendary warrior, as rewritten by Kingston, aims at disturbing the natural order of the two sexes and revising the labor partition by showing that masculine force is not necessarily a male attribute, since even women can be bold and victorious in combat. When Mulan meets the giant as the epitome of masculinity, she manifests an incredible dexterity in the manipulation of her sword. Look at what she said. First, I cut off his leg with one sword swipe. When the giant stamped towards me, I cut off his head. Another example, when she met the Baron who oppressed her community and robbed the community, raped the girls, etc. She said, when I saw he started eyes at my wrists, I slashed him across the face, and on the second stroke, cut off his head. End of quote. So the power here of Kingston's conception of the hybrid character of Mulan lies in her preservation of femininity while performing masculinity. Of course, her combination of masculine as well as feminine characteristics makes her fly over the gender boundaries and grants her freedom to move from one sex to another and be simply human being. Mulan, of course, she acknowledges her role as a mother, and she said, now my public duties are finished. I said, I will stay with you doing farm work and housework and giving you more sons. And of course, she, of course, will show that she accepts the equation of femininity with the procreation, but remains masculine on the inside, living in the glory of the past and ready for another call of the duty. When she was an army leader and a fighter on the field, she was culturally masculine while hiding her femininity. as defined by her community. Today, as a mother, she is culturally feminine while concealing her masculine impulse. By the end, there's nothing called masculinity or femininity because she can perform both and excel in them both. She integrates her all attributes in her hybrid identity. Now, her power actually lies in being able to live as a woman in her private life, sensual and affectionate, while performing masculine role outdoors to appear rigid and merciless. I'm going just to talk about that very quickly. The metamorphosis from one gender to another to cope with the situation. Just to wrap up, okay? I'm not going to go. It's a very important part. That part of cross-dressing, right? How to masquerade, okay, oneself to a man's appearance or wearing clothes typical of the opposite sex, because she was fighting under men's clothes, right? So when Kamulan becomes pregnant, she hides her belly to remain masculine on the exterior. I'm quoting her: "When I became pregnant during the last 4 months, I wore my armor, altered that I looked like a powerful big man." End of quote. The challenging envisioning here of a pregnant man on the war battlefield is an enactment of hermaphroditism, where the body looks masculine while remaining on the inside feminine. Femulan is a reminder of Carl Jung's identification of the hermaphrodite, I'm quoting Jung, as the original and broken state of undifferentiation. Her hermaphroditism is biologically substantiated, and that's a point which I really liked. Her hermaphroditism is biologically substantiated through the presence of the genitals of her young baby, who's a boy, right, inside her womb. When she envelopes that hybrid condition by a male costume, she moves beyond biology to embrace the question of identity, of gender identity. Transvestism allows a space for the female body to live the identity of a man as culture defines. The androgynous body of Kingston Famulan stands for the intersection of the two genders while condemning gender construction. And Jung sees that the archetype of the androgyne as potentially very healthy union of opposites, which he termed the polyandry. Right. Just a couple of words to wrap up. I'm really sorry, but I could not really reduce it more than that. So the Kingston Famulan continuum, as incarnated in the figure of a female warrior, tends to preserve a symbolic sisterly union conceived to fight overbearing conventions. The speaking I, and I'm quoting Kingston, "I would have to grow a warrior woman," unquote, confirms that Kingston considers herself a warrior. Kingston herself is a warrior who uses her book as a weapon against hierarchization and gender opposition. If Famulan uses her sword to fight oppression, Kingston raises her pen to combat discrimination.